The sauna on our family estate had long been a point of pride and mystery. Nestled at the edge of a dense forest, its cedar walls absorbed the conversations and laughter of generations. As a child, I had felt a kind of enchanted reverence for it. It was a place where we shed the world's burdens, enveloped in steam and the comforting scent of birch. I had heard whispers among the elders about the Bannock. A spirit said to dwell in the depths of the bathhouse. The Bannock was considered a guardian, sometimes benevolent, sometimes not, who could decide whether your visit would be refreshing or terrifying. These tales were brushed aside as mere folklore, charming stories spun to keep children in line. I never gave them much thought, until that summer when my curiosity led me down a path I did not expect. It started as a typical summer afternoon. Golden light filtered through the canopy, casting intricate shadows on the forest floor. I had returned to the estate after several years away, driven by a restless hunger for the familiar yet enigmatic serenity of the woods. The estate was largely unchanged, a pocket of the past preserved amidst the constant flux of modern life. I spent my days meandering through the forest, reacquainting myself with every bend and nook. I was not alone in this endeavor. Two friends from the nearby village, Alexei and Mikhail, joined me in these explorations. They were fellow enthusiasts of the unknown, both eager to unearth local legends and cryptid lore. For us, the sauna held a kind of mythic status. It was the center of many tales, and we believed it might hold secrets of its own. We spoke often of wanting to experience something beyond the ordinary, to touch the supernatural that seemed just out of reach. And so, it was inevitable that we decided to pursue the Bannock legend. The first disturbance occurred on a humid evening when we gathered for a session in the sauna. The air was thick with heat, and the rhythmic sizzle of water on stones was a soothing soundtrack. Amidst the steam, we shared stories, our voices a low murmur. It was then that I first noticed the change, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, as if the very walls were listening. The steam thickened in an unnatural way, clinging to our skin with a heaviness that defied explanation. As I blinked through the haze, I caught sight of Alexei's face, contorted in a mix of surprise and something resembling fear. He said he felt an unexpected chill, a cold draft weaving through the warmth. "Did you feel that?" he whispered, almost as if afraid to disturb whatever presence seemed to hover nearby. Mikhail and I exchanged bewildered glances, neither of us having sensed the same. We laughed it off as a trick of the mind, perhaps a result of the heat and our eagerness to find something otherworldly. Yet, the laughter felt uneasy, as if it were an inadequate defense against what we could not understand. Despite the disquieting experience, or perhaps because of it, our curiosity only grew. We returned the following evening, undeterred by the previous disturbance. We convinced ourselves that real evidence required perseverance and a willingness to confront fear head-on. The second visit was markedly different. As we settled onto the benches, the familiar warmth swaddling us like a well-worn blanket, there was a palpable tension in the air. It was as if the sauna itself held its breath, waiting. It wasn't long before the escalation came. The steam whirled with an unusual vigor, forming shapes that seemed almost deliberate in their design. My skin prickled, not from the heat, but from the sensation of being observed. I glanced around, half expecting to see some figure materializing from the vapor. Then we heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible chuckle. It was the kind of sound that sends an involuntary shiver down your spine, not from volume, but from the intimate proximity it suggests. It felt as if the sound came from within the very walls, an ethereal giggle playing with our nerves. We sat frozen, silence our only refuge. Alexei, usually the bravest among us, shifted uneasily. "Maybe we should leave," he suggested, his voice uncharacteristically small. But Mikhail, ever the skeptic, refused to yield. "It's just the wind," he insisted, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. Reluctantly, we stayed, though our previous enthusiasm had waned to a cautious vigilance. The light-hearted adventure we envisioned had become something else entirely, a test of nerve and resolve. Our resolve was truly tested on the third night. As dusk fell, the estate grew quiet, the forest around it an ink-black sea. We approached the sauna with a trepidation that bordered on reverence. Each creak of the wooden floorboards, each hiss of steam, was magnified 100-fold in the stillness. We entered, finding the air already thick with tension. As we settled in, the familiar warmth wrapped around us, but it was a comfort laced with apprehension. The silence was absolute, pressing against us from all sides. The climax came suddenly, without warning. The room plunged into darkness, the flickering candle we had brought snuffed out as if pinched by invisible fingers. In the pitch black, the steam seemed to pulse with life, shifting and stirring as though driven by a will of its own. Then came the voice, unmistakable and clear, a soft murmur, unintelligible yet laden with intent. It was a voice like no other, ancient and knowing, with a timbre that resonated in the marrow of our bones. It was the Bannik, or so we believed, addressing us directly. We sat paralyzed, each of us held in thrall by the presence that filled the room. My heart thundered in my chest, my breath caught somewhere between disbelief and stark terror. There was no mistaking the sensation that we were no longer alone, that an unseen force had taken notice of our intrusion. As the voice faded, replaced by an oppressive silence, the darkness remained. We fumbled for the door, driven by a primal instinct to flee. The cool night air hit us like a wave as we burst from the sauna, our steps hurried and clumsy as we sought refuge in the familiar embrace of the estate. We did not speak of the encounter in those first moments. Instead, we sat in the kitchen, the warm glow of the lamp a beacon of sanity amidst the chaos of our thoughts. The experience had shaken us, stripping away the bravado that had lured us into the sauna's depths. Though the immediate danger had passed, the lingering fear remained. It followed us like a shadow, an insidious presence that seeped into our dreams and colored our waking moments with a persistent unease. We had sought the extraordinary, and it had found us, leaving behind a mark that would not easily fade. The estate, once a sanctuary, of peace and nostalgia, now held an edge of foreboding. The forest paths seemed to whisper with secrets, the rustling leaves a tapestry of unseen watchers. I found myself glancing over my shoulder more often, alert to movements that might not have been. The sauna, too, was transformed in our eyes. It remained a fixture on the grounds, unchanged in appearance, yet fundamentally altered in meaning. We avoided it, respecting a boundary that we had once been too eager to cross. In time, the sharpness of that night dulled, becoming a memory we cautiously revisited only in the safety of daylight. We spoke of it less frequently, our words edged with a respect born of true understanding. The Bannock, whether real or imagined, had imparted a lesson, a reminder of the mysteries that lay beyond our comprehension, lurking in the quiet corners of the world. So we moved forward, carrying with us the echoes of that encounter, a cautionary tale for those who might follow in our footsteps. The estate remained, as it always had, a place suspended between the ordinary and the extraordinary. The Bannock's presence was unconfirmed, yet undeniable, a spectral guardian watching over the threshold of the sauna, waiting for the next unwary soul to seek what they might not be ready to find. The snow fell gently from the sky, blanketing the forest in a thick, muffling layer of white. I had always found solace in the woods, especially in winter when the world seemed to hold its breath. The only sound, the crunch of snow beneath my boots. The sauna, a weathered wooden structure nestled between towering pine trees, was my retreat from the noise and haste of everyday life. Its worn cedar planks and smoke-stained chimney spoke of years of use, a sanctuary offering warmth amid the chill. It was a place where I could be alone with my thoughts, letting the steam soothe away my worries. The first time I noticed something was amiss, it was barely perceptible. A whisper carried on the wind, a shadow flitting across the corner of my eye. I dismissed it as imagination, the kind of fancy that often accompanies solitude in the wilderness. Yet, as I sat inside the sauna, the heat enveloping me like a comforting shroud, I couldn't shake the sensation that I was not alone. I tried to rationalize it, attributing my unease to the creaking of the wooden beams as they expanded in the heat. But deep down, I knew there was more to it. It wasn't long before the disturbances became impossible to ignore. The whispers grew in number and intensity, threading through the trees like a chorus of invisible voices. At times, I could almost discern words, though they were in no language I recognized. The shadows, too, became bolder, forming shapes that danced just beyond the reach of the sauna's warm glow. They seemed to beckon, inviting me into the heart of the forest, where light was a stranger and the snow an eternal guest. Driven by a curiosity mingled with a sense of impending dread, I ventured deeper into the woods. The air was sharp with cold, each breath I took crystallizing in the air before me. The path was difficult to navigate, the snow covering familiar landmarks and leaving me disoriented. The whispers had grown louder, resonating within my mind, guiding my steps with an insistent urgency. It was there, in a clearing blanketed in pristine snow, that I encountered them. They were creatures of myth and lore, their forms shifting and ethereal, eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. They circled me, their movements graceful and deliberate, as if participating in some ancient dance. I should have been afraid, yet there was a strange tranquility in their presence, a calm that belied the danger I instinctively felt. One among them stepped forward, its form more distinct than the others. It regarded me with a penetrating gaze that seemed to peer into the very depths of my soul. There was an intelligence there, an awareness beyond human comprehension. It spoke without words, a communication of thought and feeling that transcended language. I understood that they were entities bound to the forest, spirits of the land who had existed long before humankind walked the earth. They were guardians, protectors of a realm that defied the encroaching modern world. Yet there was something more, a presence among them that held a darker aspect. A figure emerged, its features obscured by shadow, a palpable aura of malevolence clinging to it like a second skin. The others regarded it with a wary deference, a respect born of fear. This was no guardian, but a creature of ancient evil, a being of immense power, bound by an age-old pact. In that moment, I realized that I had trespassed upon sacred ground, a place where the veil between worlds was thin, and the creatures here were not merely spirits, but beings capable of terrible acts. The dark figure approached, its intentions clear in the way it carried itself, a predator seeking prey. Yet, it did not attack. Instead, it offered a deal, a bargain whispered through my mind, promising power and knowledge in exchange for a simple pledge. The temptation was palpable, a siren call that resonated with the deepest parts of my ambition. But I knew the stories, the tales of deals struck with such creatures, bargains that always ended in ruin. The forest seemed to hold its breath as I pondered, the spirits watching in silent judgment. I refused. My voice was steady despite the fear that gripped my heart. The figure paused, its expression inscrutable. For a moment, I thought it might strike me down where I stood, but instead, it nodded slowly and faded back into the shadows, leaving me alone with the guardians who watched with eyes full of knowing. Relief washed over me, though it was tinged with an unshakable sense of foreboding. I knew that I had narrowly escaped a fate that would have bound me irrevocably to the forest and its dark secrets. The spirits remained, their presence a reminder of the delicate balance between light and darkness that my refusal had maintained. But something had changed. The whispers followed me back to the sauna, their tone less insistent, yet ever present, a constant reminder of the choice I had made. The shadows were less pronounced, but they lingered in the corners of my vision, a testament to the otherworldly eyes that watched over the forest. The sauna no longer felt like a sanctuary. The warmth was no longer comforting, but oppressive. The steam a veil that obscured what lay beyond its walls. I could sense the spirits outside, their presence a gentle pressure against my mind, a reminder of their eternal vigilance. Time passed, and the forest remained unchanged, a timeless expanse of snow and silence. Yet, I was not the same. The encounter had marked me, a subtle shift in perception that altered the way I saw the world. I was aware of the spirits now, felt their presence in the rustle of leaves, the whisper of wind through the trees. They were part of the landscape, as intrinsic as the snow and the cold. The forest had become a place of both wonder and unease, a reminder of what lay beyond the realm of human understanding. I still visited, drawn by its beauty and the sense of peace that lingered beneath the surface. But I was careful to remain within the boundaries, wary of the darkness that lurked at the edges of perception. The spirits allowed me to pass, neither welcoming nor hostile, simply present. I had become part of their world, an observer granted a glimpse into the mysteries that lay beyond the human realm. The whispers still accompanied me, a haunting melody that echoed through my thoughts, a connection to the unseen. I had survived my encounter with the spirits, but the forest would never release its hold on me. Its mysteries were woven into my soul, a tapestry of light and shadow that colored my dreams and haunted my waking hours. The deal I had refused lingered in my mind, a testament to the power of temptation and the strength required to resist it. In the end, the forest was unchanged, its secrets intact. But I had been altered. My perspective widened to encompass the unseen world that lay just beyond the veil. The sauna remained, a beacon of warmth in the cold, a reminder of the place where I had faced the darkness and emerged unscathed. Yet even in the safety of my home, far from the haunting beauty of the forest, I could feel it. The whispers and shadows were never far, a constant presence that reminded me of the world beyond. I had survived, but the spirits were always with me, their watchful eyes a silent testament to the bargain I had refused and the life I had chosen to lead. The sky above the lake mirrored the mood I carried in my heart, gray and indifferent, with a touch of melancholy blue. It was my annual trip to the secluded lake, nestled within the arms of a vast, whispering forest. I liked the isolation, the solace it provided me from the humdrum of my life back in the city. The trees here were ancient, standing like guardians of secrets long forgotten, their branches twisting in silent conversations with the wind. This year felt different, though. There was a heaviness in the air, an unspoken anticipation that tugged at the edges of my consciousness, like the faintest whisper of a breeze nudging a curtain. As always, I pitched my tent a safe distance from the lake's edge, careful to respect the boundary where land met water, a ritual I had followed since the first visit. The first disturbance came on the second night. I sat by the crackling campfire, its flames casting flickering shadows that danced among the towering trees. It was there, beside the comforting warmth of the fire, that I first felt the eyes upon me. It was a sensation inexplicable, as if the forest itself had grown an awareness that was now solely focused on my presence. I shrugged it off as an effect of the solitude, the way solitude sometimes plays tricks on the mind. Yet, the feeling persisted. Even as I retreated into the tent, zipping myself into its cocoon, the sensation of being watched clung to me like an unwanted guest. Sleep was elusive, flitting just out of reach, leaving me with restless thoughts that swirled like leaves in an autumn wind. The following day, I ventured deeper into the woods, hoping that the hike would clear my mind. The forest was dense, its canopy a mosaic of greens and browns, the earthy scent of damp leaves enveloping me. But as I traversed the familiar paths, I noticed the uncanny silence. The forest, usually vibrant with the symphony of nature, was now mute, as if holding its breath for something to unfold. It was then that I stumbled upon the path I had never taken before. Narrow and overgrown, it beckoned with a strange allure, a siren call to the adventurer within. Curiosity piqued, I veered off my usual route, each step deeper into the unknown, echoing in the silence. The path led me to a clearing, a circle of space devoid of trees, where an old stone well stood at its center. Time had not been kind to the structure. Moss clung to its stones, and vines wove a tangled embrace around its circumference. Yet there was an undeniable presence about it, a gravity that seemed to draw me closer. As I approached, a chill wrapped around me, though the day was warm. I peered into the well, its depths shrouded in darkness that seemed to stretch infinitely. And then, as if the shadows themselves murmured, I heard it. A voice, soft yet distinct, emanating from the abyss below. "Make a wish," it coaxed, the words barely more than a breath. Startled, I stepped back, my rational mind scrambling for explanations. It was impossible, I told myself. A trick of acoustics, perhaps, or the wind playing games with my senses. Yet the voice continued, insistent, offering promises of dreams fulfilled, of burdens lifted, for just a simple promise in return. I hesitated, the rational part of me locked in battle with a burgeoning curiosity. But then, like a dam breaking, the words spilled forth, a wish formed from the depths of my own desires, a wish for freedom from the constraints and monotony of my life, from the invisible chains that bound me. The moment the wish left my lips, the air shifted. The forest seemed to exhale, its silence broken by the rustle of leaves stirred by a sudden breeze. The voice from the well faded, leaving only the echo of its promise lingering in my mind. Returning to my camp, I found myself enveloped in a surreal calm. The heaviness that had accompanied me since my arrival seemed to dissipate, replaced by a clarity that felt almost euphoric. I spent the rest of the day in an unusual state of peace, thoughts of the voice and the well gradually receding into the background of my consciousness. But with nightfall came a change, subtle yet profound. The air grew thick with a palpable tension, a sense of anticipation that hung heavily. As darkness deepened, the familiar unease returned, more intense than before. The forest around me seemed alive with whispers, voices that thrummed at the edge of hearing. In the stillness of the night, I heard it. Footsteps crunching on leaves, deliberate and purposeful, approaching steadily. My heart thudded in my chest, a drumbeat of growing fear. Grabbing a flashlight, I unzipped the tent and stepped out, the beam cutting through the darkness, revealing nothing. The footsteps stopped, leaving the oppressive silence in their wake. Yet the feeling of being watched, of an unseen presence lurking just out of sight, remained. Unable to shake the unease, I spent the night by the fire, its warmth a fragile barrier against the encroaching dread. As dawn broke, I found myself questioning the events of the previous day. Had it been real, or merely a creation of an overactive imagination, spurred by isolation? The rational part of me clung to skepticism, yet a deeper instinct warned otherwise. Determined to confront whatever haunted these woods, I returned to the clearing, the path more familiar, yet no less foreboding. The well stood as before, its presence both invisible and undeniable. I approached cautiously, the memory of the voice a chilling reminder of the bargain I had entered. I called out, my voice steady despite the fear coiling within me. There was no response, only the oppressive silence of the forest. But as I turned to leave, the wind rose, swirling leaves in a vortex that seemed to dance around the well. And then, like an echo from the depths, the voice returned, colder now, its promises laced with menace. You wished for freedom, it intoned, and freedom you shall have. With those words, the ground beneath me trembled, and the world seemed to shift, the outlines of reality blurring like a painting caught in the rain. Panic surged as I tried to flee, but my limbs felt heavy, tethered by unseen chains. The forest closed in, its shadows enveloping me, and for an agonizing moment, I was lost in a swath of darkness. When the world righted itself, I found myself back at the campsite, disoriented and drenched in sweat. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows that crept toward the tent. The day had slipped away, lost in the haze of whatever had transpired. That night, the woods thrummed with life, an eerie vibrancy that set my nerves on edge. Every rustle, every crack of a twig seemed amplified, a sinister symphony conducted by unseen hands. Sleep was an impossibility, every attempt thwarted by the creeping dread that coiled around me. And then the dreams came, vivid, haunting landscapes, where the forest was alive with malevolent intent. I wandered through these dreams, pursued by phantoms that whispered promises of escape, of freedom bought with a price I dared not contemplate. When morning light finally broke, it brought little comfort. Exhaustion weighed heavy, and the realization dawned that I was ensnared in a pact that transcended comprehension. The freedom I sought twisted into a cage of shadows, binding me to the forest and its haunting whispers. Determined to break the cycle, I resolved to confront the source of my torment. Returning to the clearing, I stood before the well, defiant yet fearful, demanding release from the bargain that bound me. The forest responded, its voice a cacophony of wind and leaves, the well at its epicenter a dark maw that seemed to swallow hope. The voice emerged once more, cold as the grave, each word a death knell to my aspirations. Freedom comes at a cost, it declared, and your debt remains unpaid. With those words, the forest came alive, a storm of shadows and sound that enveloped me, tearing at the fabric of my sanity. I fought against the tide, struggling to reclaim myself from the grip of the pact I'd unwittingly forged. Time lost its meaning as I wrestled with the malevolent force. My world narrowed to the struggle against the darkness that sought to devour me. But as the storm raged, a realization dawned, a flicker of understanding that the true prison was the one I'd built within my mind. With a final desperate effort, I reached into the depths of my own will, summoning the strength to confront the fear that bound me. The forest's clamor faded, the shadows retreating as the weight of the pact lifted, leaving me breathless and alone in the clearing. The well stood silent, its presence diminished, a relic of a story it had once held. I turned away, the forest vibrant once more, its whispers tempered by an understanding that transcended words. As I made my way back to the campsite, the air felt lighter, the forest a familiar companion rather than a specter of dread. Yet, the memory lingered, a quiet reminder of the boundaries crossed, the supernatural pact that had both ensnared and liberated me. Packing up my belongings, I prepared to leave the lake and its surrounding woods, my heart a blend of relief and trepidation. This place had changed me, its secrets indelibly carved into the fabric of my being. As I left, I cast one final glance at the forest, a silent acknowledgement of the pact's lasting imprint. And though I returned to my life, the experience haunted my dreams. The line between reality and the otherworldly forever blurred. The forest remained with me, its whispers a lingering presence that echoed in the quiet moments, a reminder of the deal that in the depths of a shadowed well. The world moved on, but I remained tethered to that place, a subtle pull that promised both wonder and terror. And as I lay in the stillness of night, I knew that my last trip to the lake had left me forever altered, bound by a pact that defied the bounds of reason, a pact that whispered promises of freedom entwined with shadows. The house stood as it always had, nestled at the edge of a sprawling woodland that seemed to cradle it with age-old arms. Its white Victorian facade gleamed in the dimming light of dusk, and the surrounding gardens were meticulously kept, as my mother would have them. She loved her home, the way it existed in harmony with the encroaching wild, as if it were the last bastion of something human before nature reclaimed what was rightfully hers. For as long as I could remember, those woods had been both sanctuary and mystery to me. They were a place where I could escape the sometimes stifling air of family obligations and expectations. My walks through the trees were meditative, a chance to breathe deeply of pine and earth and forget the weight of being the daughter expected to uphold all my parents had built. Evening had just begun to settle like a soft, silken curtain when the first disturbance whispered through our lives. It was a night much like any other, with the chorus of crickets rising in the warm air, their cadence a lullaby that eased us into complacency. I had come in from one of my walks, shaking off the shadows of the forest, and was greeted by the familiar warmth of home. My father was in his study as usual, a solitary figure hunched over his work. My mother flitted about in the kitchen, preparing dinner with a practiced ease that made me think she could do it in her sleep. Dinner was a quiet affair, punctuated by the usual small talk. My father commented on the latest town gossip. My mother on the state of her garden. I contributed little, as was my habit, preferring to observe the dynamic between them. It was comfortable, predictable, the kind of normalcy that felt like an old, worn sweater. But later that night, as I lay in bed, a strange sensation settled over me, prickling my skin as if the air itself had shifted. I dreamt of the woods. In my dreams, they were alive, the trees whispering secrets I could almost understand, I wandered through them, feeling an unnerving presence just beyond the edges of my vision, a shadow that promised both fear and fascination. When I awoke, the feeling lingered, a heavy weight pressing against my chest. The first real sign that something was amiss came the next evening. I was on one of my habitual walks, the path winding through the underbrush, when I heard the unmistakable sound of someone following me. It was subtle at first, the soft crack of a twig, the rustle of leaves. I turned several times, expecting to see a deer or perhaps a stray dog, but the woods were empty, holding their breath in anticipation. The sensation of being watched was palpable, a prickling awareness that made the hair at the nape of my neck stand on end. Despite my unease, I chalked it up to an overactive imagination. I returned home, trying to shake off the anxiety that clung to me like cobwebs. My parents noticed my distraction, of course, but I assured them I was just tired. Little did I know that this was only the beginning. Over the following days, the disturbances became more pronounced. Objects in the house were misplaced, though none of us could recall moving them. Shadows danced at the corners of my vision, flickering like candle flames in a draft. And always, whenever I ventured into the woods, I felt that same presence, as if the trees themselves had eyes, watching, waiting. Then one evening, my suspicions took a more tangible form. I had wandered deeper into the forest, drawn by a compulsion I couldn't explain. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon, and the moon's pale light cast an eerie glow through the trees. It was there, in a small clearing surrounded by ancient oaks, that I saw her. She stood at the edge of the clearing, her silhouette sharp against the shadows. Her skin was pale, almost luminous, and her dark hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall of night. Her eyes met mine, and I was caught, unable to look away. There was something familiar about her, a whisper of recognition that tugged at my memory. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. She smiled, a slow, knowing smile that chilled me despite its warmth. "A friend," she replied, her voice low and musical. I should have been afraid, should have turned and run back to the safety of my home. But instead, I found myself drawn toward her, the distance between us closing as if compelled by some unseen force. Her presence was magnetic, a pull that resonated deep within the marrow of my bones. We talked for what felt like hours, though time seemed to lose all meaning in her presence. She spoke of the forest, of its secrets and its history, and I listened, entranced. Her name, she told me, was Lilith, a name that seemed to echo with ancient power. Our conversation was intimate, as if we were two souls who had known each other for lifetimes. When I finally returned home, it was with the dawn, the first light of morning spilling over the horizon. My parents were frantic with worry, their relief palpable when I walked through the door. I offered no explanation for my absence, mumbling only that I had lost track of time. My mother, though clearly concerned, let the matter drop, perhaps sensing that my silence was a wall she could not breach. Yet, I could not keep Lilith a secret for long. My encounters with her continued, each meeting deepening the sense of connection between us. In her presence, I felt alive in a way I had never known, as if she awakened a part of me that had long lain dormant. But with her came a shadow, a growing unease that seeped into the fabric of my life. I began to notice changes, subtle at first, but impossible to ignore. Sleep eluded me, my dreams filled with visions of the forest and Lilith's haunting eyes. My appetite waned, replaced by a hunger I couldn't quite satisfy. And more disturbingly, I found myself withdrawing from my family, my interactions with them feeling increasingly strained and hollow. My father was the first to confront me, his voice gentle but firm. "Is there something you're not telling us?" he asked one evening, his eyes searching mine for answers I wasn't ready to give. "I'm fine," I replied, forcing a smile that felt brittle. "Just tired." He nodded, but his expression remained troubled, as if he could see through the veneer of normalcy I struggled to maintain. The tension at home grew, a silent undercurrent that threatened to pull us all under. My mother, always sensitive to shifts in the emotional landscape, took to watching me with a quiet intensity, her concern a palpable presence in the room. I felt trapped, caught between the world I had always known and the mysterious allure of the woods and Lilith. The nights grew darker, the forest more forbidding, yet I was drawn to it, to her. Each meeting with Lilith was a dance on the edge of something dangerous, a thrill that both terrified and exhilarated me. She spoke of things I could barely comprehend, of worlds beyond my understanding, and her words wove a tapestry of enchantment that held me captive. But with every encounter, the reality I returned to felt more distant, more fragile. My family, once my anchor, became a distant echo, their voices muffled by the weight of secrets I carried. I was two people, divided between the girl I had been and the woman I was becoming, a transformation I neither asked for nor fully understood. The climax came without warning, a night when the air was thick with the scent of rain. I had wandered into the forest, driven by a restlessness that refused to be tamed. Lilith was waiting, her presence a beacon in the dark. But this time, there was something different about her, an intensity that crackled in the space between us. "You have to choose," she said, her voice soft yet commanding. "Choose?" The words seemed to echo in the stillness, a question that carried the weight of destiny. She stepped closer, her eyes searching mine. "Stay with me, or return to them. You cannot have both." The choice was impossible, a chasm too wide to bridge. I loved my family, yet the call of the forest and Lilith was a siren song I couldn't ignore. Torn, I hesitated, feeling the weight of her gaze upon me. In that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The forest, the very earth beneath my feet, waited for my decision. The path I chose would define me, shape the course of my life in ways I couldn't yet imagine. I turned, stepping back from the edge of the clearing, my heart heavy with the decision I had made. It was then that the forest erupted in sound, a cacophony of rustling leaves and snapping branches. The presence I had felt all those nights revealed itself, shadowy figures emerging from the trees, their eyes glinting in the moonlight. Lilith reached for me, her hand cold and comforting. "Come with me," she urged, her voice a lifeline thrown into the dark. But I hesitated, my mind a storm of conflicting desires. My family, my home, these were the ties that bound me. Yet the taste of freedom, of something other, was intoxicating. The figures drew closer, a pack of wolves descending upon their prey. In the end, it was the thought of my parents, their love a steadfast light in the chaos of my world, that anchored me. I tore myself away from Lilith, my heart breaking with the effort. Her expression was unreadable, a mask that hid whatever emotions she might have felt. I ran, the forest a blur of shadows and fear, the sound of pursuit echoing in my ears. But when I burst from the trees, stumbling into the light of our garden, I found only silence behind me. No footsteps, no eyes watching from the dark. Only the quiet hum of the world resuming its normal course. My parents were waiting, their relief a palpable wave that swept over me as I fell into their arms. There were no questions, no accusations, only the warmth of their embrace, grounding me in a reality I had nearly lost. In the days that followed, the woods seemed to retreat, the presence that had haunted me dissipating like mist in the morning sun. Lilith was gone, her absence a dull ache that lingered in my chest. Yet, as the days turned to weeks, I found solace in the rhythm of life, in the steady beat of normalcy re-establishing itself. But the forest never truly left me. It remains, a lingering whisper at the edge of consciousness, a reminder of choices made and paths untaken. And sometimes, when the night is deep and the wind murmurs secrets through the trees, I feel her presence, a shadow that flickers at the edge of memory, waiting for the day I might return. The forest seemed to hold its breath that evening, as if anticipating my arrival back to the house, nestled deep within its embrace. I hadn't been here in years, but the path to the front door was as familiar as the steady beat of my heart. Pine needles crunched underfoot, releasing the scent of reassurance and homecoming. The house stood steadfast among towering trees, its wooden exterior worn yet welcoming, like an old friend, reluctant to let go of shared memories. Inside, the rooms were silent, dust motes dancing lazily in the shafts of late afternoon light. It felt strange to be back after all this time. I had inherited this secluded sanctuary from my late grandmother, and though I had often been drawn to its solitude, life in the city had kept me away. Now, with a recent breakup looming over my sense of self, the call of the forest had become impossible to ignore. As I settled in, the house felt both mine and yet, eerily, someone else's. Shadows stretched long across the floorboards, whispering secrets from the past. An old photograph on the mantel caught my eye, a snapshot of my grandmother with me as a child, our faces lit with laughter and the sun of a summer long gone. It was comforting to see her, to remember the warmth of her presence, though it did little to dispel the strange sensation that the house was holding something back, something just out of reach. The first night was restless. Sleep eluded me as an unsettling stillness wrapped around the house. The sounds of the forest, usually a symphony of life, seemed muted, as if the trees were conspiring in hushed tones. I told myself it was just the unfamiliarity, the disquiet of being alone in a space once filled with life. The second day dawned with a crisp chill in the air. I busied myself with chores, clearing out cobwebs and opening windows to let the forest breathe within the walls. It was during one of these unassuming moments, while I was sweeping the kitchen floor, that I first sensed it. A peculiar shift in the air, like a breath on the back of my neck. I turned sharply, the broom clattering to the floor. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw a shadow moving against the grain of sunlight streaming through the window. I blinked, and it was gone, leaving only the rustle of leaves outside as evidence that anything had been there at all. Brushing it off as a trick of the light, I continued with my day, though a shiver of unease lingered beneath my skin. I spent the afternoon walking through the forest, the autumn leaves crunching beneath my boots in a satisfying rhythm. The familiarity of the trails was soothing, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if the forest itself was a thing alive, observing my every move with ancient, knowing eyes. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I heard a knock at the door. The sound was unexpected, startling in the serenity of the forest. Who could be visiting at this hour, here in the middle of nowhere? With a cautious curiosity, I approached the door and opened it to find Alex, standing on the threshold. Alex, my ex, whose departure had been as sudden as our love had once been deep, a whirlwind romance that had ended in a storm of silence and unanswered questions. And now, here they stood, a sheepish smile playing on their lips, eyes that once held promises, now shadowed with something I couldn't quite read. "I heard you were back," Alex said, their voice familiar yet carrying an undercurrent of something darker, unspoken. "I needed some time away," I replied, trying to keep my tone light, though my heart drummed a frantic beat against my ribs. "Mind if I come in?" There was an almost imperceptible hesitation in their request, a flicker in their gaze that sent a chill racing down my spine. I nodded, stepping aside to let them enter, the warmth of their presence unsettling in the cold confines of the house. We talked in the living room, skirting around the reasons for their sudden visit. It felt surreal, sitting here with them, the weight of the past pressing between us like a tangible thing. As the conversation meandered, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, that the person sitting across from me wasn't entirely the Alex I had known. Their laughter carried an edge, their eyes too often gazing past me into the shadows that seemed to lengthen with each passing moment. When they finally left, the night seemed darker, the silence heavier. The forest pressed close against the windows, a looming presence that watched with patient, inscrutable eyes. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of shadowy figures and whispered voices that faded with the dawn. Days passed, and the sense of unease grew. Alex began visiting regularly, each encounter adding another layer to the creeping disquiet that had settled in my bones. Our conversations danced around familiar topics, yet there was a distance between us, as if a veil had been drawn over their intentions, obscuring them from view. It was during one such visit that the veil began to slip. We were seated in the kitchen, sunlight streaming through the window, when Alex reached for my hand. Their touch was cold, a chill that seemed to seep into my skin, and I pulled back instinctively. "What's wrong?" they asked, a frown creasing their brow. "It's nothing," I replied, though the lie tasted bitter on my tongue. "Is it?" They pressed, their gaze piercing, as if searching for answers in the depths of my eyes. I hesitated, the words tangled in my throat. How could I explain the sense of wrongness that seemed to cling to them, to us? Instead, I forced a smile, deflecting with practiced ease. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the shadows lengthened once more, I found myself drawn to the attic. It was a place I had rarely ventured, a repository for forgotten memories and childhood fears. The stairs creaked beneath my weight, each step a testament to the passage of time. The attic was filled with dust and relics of the past, boxes stacked haphazardly against the walls. I sifted through them, curiosity mingling with a sense of trepidation. It was there, buried beneath old photo albums and moth-eaten blankets, that I found it. A journal, its leather cover worn and cracked with age. The entries were penned in my grandmother's distinctive script, the words a window into a life filled with joys and sorrows, hopes and fears. But it was the final entry that caught my breath. The ink smudged, as if hastily written. "They are here," it read, "the hidden ones. They watch and wait, wrapped in shadows and secrets. Beware their touch, their whispered lies. They come with faces familiar, yet not, seeking what is not theirs to take." The words echoed in my mind, a chilling premonition that settled around me like a shroud. I closed the journal with trembling hands, the weight of its warning pressing heavily on my heart. Could it be true? Had the forest's whispers reached my grandmother, as they now reached me? And what of Alex, whose presence seemed ever more like a specter haunting the edges of my reality? The following days were a blur, my mind racing with questions and half-formed theories. I began to notice things I had overlooked before. The way Alex's reflection seemed to linger a moment too long in mirrors. The coldness that seeped from their touch, like a warning. The shadows in the house seemed to stretch and curl, taking on shapes that dissolved when I tried to focus on them. It all came to a head one stormy night. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the windows with a ferocity that spoke of the chaos within. Alex arrived unexpectedly, their demeanor more urgent, their eyes wild with an intensity that bordered on desperation. "We need to talk," they said, their voice a low rumble beneath the storm's roar. I nodded, fear threading through my veins with icy fingers. We retreated to the living room, the fire crackling in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the walls. "I know you feel it," Alex began, their gaze locked on mine. "The forest, the house. They're alive in a way that's more than just trees and stone." I swallowed hard, the truth of their words settling like stones in my stomach. "What do you mean?" I didn't come here by accident, they continued, their voice strained. Something brought me back. A force, an energy that wants to claim what it believes is its own. Claim what? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. You, Alex said, the word a cold blade between us. And me. The revelation struck like a thunderclap, the pieces falling into place with a sickening clarity. The forest, the hidden ones my grandmother had warned of, they were real, and they had set their sights on us. But why? I demanded, my voice rising with a mix of anger and fear. The forest holds power, Alex explained, their eyes flickering with an emotion I couldn't name. It draws on the energy of those it ensnares, feeding on their essence. My return was no coincidence. It wants us both, because we are connected, because our past binds us to this place. A silence fell between us, the crackling of the fire the only sound in the room. I felt a chill sweep through me, as if the shadows themselves were closing in. So what do we do? I asked, the weight of our predicament settling heavily on my shoulders. We fight, Alex said, their voice firm with determination. We can't let it take us. Throughout the night we worked, our efforts guided by the words of my grandmother's journal and the instincts that had been honed by years of living in the shadow of the forest. We gathered items of protection, salt, candles, symbols carved into wood, each a talisman against the darkness that sought to claim us. As dawn approached, we stood in the clearing behind the house, the first rays of light creeping through the trees. The air was charged with an unsettling energy, a crackling tension that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I don't know if we can do this, I admitted, fear threatening to choke my voice. We have to try, Alex replied, their grip on my hand a lifeline tethering me to the moment. Together, we formed a circle of salt around us, the ground beneath our feet solid, yet filled with an undercurrent of anticipation. The forest watched, its branches swaying in a breeze that seemed to come from nowhere, carrying with it the murmured voices of the hidden ones. As we chanted the old incantations, the air shimmered, the shadows around us deepening with a life of their own. I felt the forest's presence keenly, its ancient power pressing against our defenses, testing the strength of our resolve. For a moment, I feared we had failed, that the force we faced was too great to overcome. But then, as the sun broke free of the horizon, a radiant light washed over the clearing, dispelling the darkness in a blinding surge of warmth and clarity. The shadows receded, their whispers fading into the rustle of leaves, and the forest exhaled, as if releasing a long-held breath. We stood together, our hearts pounding with exhilaration and relief, the bond between us renewed in the face of a shared victory. As the day brightened, the forest around us seemed transformed, its watchful presence now a comforting embrace rather than a threatening specter. We returned to the house, the weight of the past lifted, though the memory of our ordeal remained etched in our minds. Days turned to weeks, and the forest continued to watch, a silent guardian of the secrets it held. Alex and I lingered, our bond strengthened by the trials we had faced, though the shadow of the hidden ones never truly vanished. Even now, as I wander the familiar paths beneath the canopy. I feel their presence, a reminder of the forces that lurk at the edges of our understanding, ever watchful, ever waiting. The forest holds its secrets close, its whispers a part of me, entwined with the memories of a haunting welcome that will linger long after the echoes of that stormy night have faded.